Hi everyone, it's Laura here for SugarPea Designs, and in today's video I'm going to share with you how to create a fall-themed thank you card using distress inks and the Eucalyptus Wreath stamp set. I started off my card by die cutting some Canson XL cardstock to an A2 size using the rectangle die in the SugarPea Designs Card Front Element Builder 2 set. This is a great set with really nice basic dies that will help you create your card fronts. And then I went ahead, mounted the wreath stamp in the Eucalyptus Wreath set on my Mini Misty, and I'm now stamping it with Versamark ink, which is a clear sticky ink, because I want to do some heat embossing with gold embossing powder. I was going for an autumn-inspired look, so I thought that a touch of gold would be really nice on the card. I made sure that everything was nicely covered, and then I funneled back the embossing powder into my jar and used my heat gun to melt it. I am moving the heat gun around and making sure to apply my heat on the front as well as on the back of my cardstock to minimize warping, and then once everything is nice and melted, I can go ahead and start the painting process. I actually started from my background, and for that I added a quick wash of color using distress inks in Scattered Straw that I applied over the entire surface, and then I came in with Rusty Hinge and Fired Brick, mostly in the wreath area. The panel was wet before I went in with the paints, so I get a nice and soft blend between the distress inks, and once that was dry I could actually start and paint the leaves. I chose 5 different colors of distress inks today, and I have Crushed Olive, Forest Moss, Scattered Straw, Rusty Hinge and Fired Brick. And I'm going to use them to paint in my leaves, and I'm going to try and create some color variation. For the first color combination, I started by laying down my distress ink in Crushed Olive, and you can see that I first diluted all the paints with some water from a distress sprayer so that I could get them nice and flowy on my paper already. So once I laid down the Crushed Olive, I dropped the Forest Moss just at the base of the leaves, and then I moved on and started working on my next color combination, which is a base coat of Scattered Straw, and then with this I'm dropping in some Rusty Hinge at the bottom of the leaves. So this will be more reddish, orangish kinds of leaves. And then the third combination will be Rusty Hinge and Fired Brick. The painting was pretty fast actually. The leaves are rather small, so it's easy to get them painted pretty quickly. And then once I have my first 3 basic color combinations, I went in and started filling the other leaves. Some of them I started with Crushed Olive, and then I added some Rusty Hinge or some Fired Brick. I also mixed the Crushed Olive with the Forest Moss there on my glass mat, used that for a base layer and added some Fired Brick. So it's nice to have different colors and to mix also your greens and your reds, and this will really give this feel of fall and autumn on today's card. At this point I was getting too muddy colors on my desk, so I went ahead, cleaned everything off and smooshed my distress inks again onto my glass mat for my final layer, where again I'm using Crushed Olive and a few dabs of that Rusty Hinge, Scattered Straw and Fired Brick. I am painting the leaves more or less randomly. I'm just trying to make sure that I don't have areas where I have all the leaves that are green or red, for example, so I'm trying to achieve some color variation within my wreath, and the fact that we have the underpainting also helps with that a lot. Once everything was painted in and completely dry, I used the distress inks that I had on my glass mat with the addition of a little bit of Forest Moss, and I used my paintbrush too to create some droplets, which I think always add a very nice touch to watercolor pieces. And then to bring in some of that gold on the background too, I took my Gansai Tambi Starry Colors palette and I used the yellow gold pan to add some gold droplets as well. Once the droplets had dried as well, I went in with some distress ink in Vintage Photo and I blended it on the edges of my panel and also a little bit in the center. I just added some very light areas there as well. I'm also making sure not to have a uniform color all around the edge because I felt this would give an even more aged look to the panel, which was really nice with the fall theme that I picked for today's card. And then I could move on and start working on the sentiment. I die cut the word grateful out of some brown cardstock using the Grateful die by SugarPea Designs, and I picked brown rather than black, which usually is my go-to for sentiments because I felt it matched the color palette very nicely. And then I stamped the rest of the sentiment from the Grateful Greetings stamp set, also by SugarPea Designs, again on some brown cardstock, and I decided to heat emboss it with the same gold embossing powder that I used for the wreath. I melted the embossing powder with my heat gun, and then I discovered that the Sentiment Strips dies by SugarPea Designs that were recently released also match nicely with the sentiments in the Grateful Greetings stamp set, which was released last year, so I could go ahead and use that to die cut a thin strip. And then I could go ahead and mount everything on a top folding A2 card base that I cut at 4 1/4 by 11 inches and scored at 5.5 inches. I'm using the corner of my Mini Misty to help me position the front panel exactly on the base. And then as a finishing touch, I decided to add some berries to this wreath using Nouveau Drops in Autumn Red. I have to say that I debated a little bit on whether I wanted to do this. I knew that I wanted to add some dimensional elements to this card, but I was a little bit afraid, to be honest, to ruin it in a way or to make some mistakes that would have forced me to start over. But actually I have to say that I'm really happy that I did it because I love the way these berries look on the final card. So I guess this is one of those times where being brave paid off. And here is the final result. I really love the combination of the warm color palette with the gold embossing powder, and this Eucalyptus Wreath stamp set is really beautiful. And that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video and I hope I inspired you to create with the SugarPea Designs Eucalyptus Wreath stamp set. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiration. Thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.